Welcome, and thanks for joining us today for the 48th episode of the Restaurant Dealmaker Show, where we discuss pertinent topics regarding the food and beverage industry with industry professionals. My guest co-host today is Pete Sittnick. Pete is a longstanding restaurateur in San Francisco. He has served as managing partner of Waterbar and Epic Steak since the iconic restaurants opened in 2008. These restaurants are amongst the highest grossing restaurants in San Francisco with 250 employees. Pete has opened, operated, and supervised more than 20 restaurants in the Bay Area and across the country. He has over 35 years of experience in the Bay Area restaurant industry. He first teamed with Pat Coletto, the famous restaurant designer, in 1988 when he was the general manager of Coletto's Italian restaurant on Powell Street in Union Square. Under Pete's direction and partnership with Pat's design of the innovative Italian eatery, Coletto's was recognized as San Francisco's favorite Italian restaurant and one of the best known in the Bay Area. He worked for the Kempton Group for 12 years and helped their management team grow the restaurant portfolio from 4 to 25. He credited Bill Kempton as one of his foremost mentors and motivators in the hospitality business. In 2001, he joined Pat Coletto Restaurants as Director of Project Development. In addition to supervising renowned Bay Area restaurants Boulevard, Erlon, and Jardiniere, he helped open Martini House in St. Helena. Pete's restaurant philosophy is to balance the needs of the three stakeholders, the guest, the employee, and the investors, which I'm sure he'll elaborate on during his presentation. In 2016, Pete was awarded a first-time ever Lifetime Achievement Award from the Golden Gate Restaurant Association. Pete grew up in Michigan, receiving his business degree from the University of Michigan. He has been a 15-year member of the Golden Gate Restaurant Association's board of directors, including 3 years as board president. Currently, Pete sits on the board of San Francisco Travel, the Cancer Prevention Institute of California, the California Hotel and Lodging Association, and he is involved as an advisor to the Sprouts Group Cooking School. He is also involved in numerous charitable endeavors, including Glide Memorial Church, Do It for Love, and Guide Dogs for the Blind. He also teaches voluntarily for the hospitality programs at City College of San Francisco and the University of San Francisco. And I've also recently just learned that he is a partner in a well-known restaurant in the East Bay called Acre. I hope I didn't screw that up. Kitchen and Bar, which used to be Oliveto, which was a very famous restaurant in the Rockridge district of Oakland. So without further ado, I want to welcome Pete, and I want to ask him as the very first question. Pete, how did you get started in the food and beverage business, and what was your first job in the industry?
Well, thanks for having me today, Steve. I appreciate it.
Pleasure.
Hopefully we can share some nuggets of insight that people can glean something from. My first foray into restaurants was in high school, where I washed dishes and bus tables and cooked. I took that experience into college at University of Michigan, and I worked in the dormitory food service for all 4 years that I was there. Worked in some campus bars and restaurants, and my degree was in business administration. I majored in accounting. In about my senior year, I realized I did not want to be an accountant, that I needed a little bit more energy and frivolity. And so I started to look at different opportunities within the restaurant sector and wound up getting hired by a company called Gilbert Robinson, which was best known for Houlihan's restaurants. And this is back in 1980. Where they had restaurants across the country. They asked me, where would you like to work? And they showed me the list, and I saw a couple restaurants in California. And having grown up in Michigan and lived there pretty much all my life, I said, hey, California would be pretty awesome. So they wound up sending a 22-year-old Midwestern kid out to the Bay Area. And that's kind of how I got my start in the business.
Cool. That's great. So what's your favorite part of the hospitality business?
There's a lot that I find gratification in. And, probably first and foremost is just the opportunity to make people happy. And that, really comes from, providing this space, this environment where people can get together, be social for whatever the reason may be. And then, through the restaurant providing great food, great service, great wine, great ambiance, great hospitality, you impact that dining experience in a way that hopefully people are going to remember, that generates this, what I would call spirit of love. And that, I think, from a guest perspective, is what I enjoy the most. Now, from the business side of it, you can still get that same satisfaction through providing a work environment for the employee group that is satisfying, that they can feel proud of, where, they can enjoy coming to work every day. And then, on the business side of it, in order to keep a restaurant thriving, surviving, and sustainable, you have to be able to make money. So there's a challenge there that I think can be gratifying as well. So combining all these different sort of emotional aspects with the reality of the financial impact of running a restaurant.
Wow, that's well stated. Just since you were talking about creating that environment for the employee so they really enjoy being in that environment, what are the key ingredients that you utilize in your management philosophy to create that enjoyable environment for the employee?
I think from a big picture standpoint, from a high overview, it's creating a culture that people can believe in, that they can buy into, but it's a culture that's centered around kindness, centered around empowerment, centered around compassion, with all of those feel good things wrapped into this structure that has boundaries as a business. So, there's obviously, in order to run a restaurant, you've got to have people show up on time and be prepared to do whatever the responsibility of that position is. And you've got to be able to have that strict standard of knowing that you're going to be staffed in a way that's going to be able to the guests the quality experience. So I think it's a balance in terms of the culture that has to happen for the employees to understand, like, this is a business. There are ways that just have to be followed, but then you can do it in a way that you're understanding that perfection is not a reality, that perfection is unattainable. So there's this grace of knowing when people are trying to do their best, then that's the best that they can do. That is, you might want to be able to push them to do a little bit more, but that's really what it's all about. So, I mean, that's a big, long-winded way of just saying that, employees in the restaurant, they want to be seen. They want to be understood as people, as human beings. So they want to be thanked when they do a good job. And they may not want to be coached when they need to improve, but you've got to be able to do that in a way that they understand it and that they can buy into it.
Yeah, very well said. Wow. So what event or events have been most challenging in your career, and how have you dealt with these challenges?
Well, I can go back to the opening of Waterbar and Epic, which we opened both restaurants on the same day, January 29th, 2008. And, these were two restaurants that we built from the ground up on the waterfront in San Francisco. So everybody, which took us a couple of years to get done, everybody knew that they were coming. There was sort of a built up anticipation. Here's two big restaurants that were highlighted by great chefs, Mark Franz and Jan Birnbaum, designed by Pat Coletto. And so there was a huge anticipation when they opened. Well, if you know your history of economy, in 2008 was when the Great Recession hit. For us, it really hit us about towards the end of that year. So our first year, we were phenomenally busy, and it was great just being able to deal with that initial reaction to the restaurant opening. 3/4 of the way through that year, business dropped off about 20%.
Yeah.
So at that point, it was trying to figure out, okay, what do we need to do now? Because where it was be ready for this huge onslaught of business. Now it was, okay, now what do we need to do to bring business in here? 2008, 2009, 2010 were all challenging years for these restaurants. And quite frankly, we did not make money. Still generating relatively high volume, but with big staffs, it was was very, very difficult. And, those first couple years. So dealing with that, not only from the pure business standpoint, but also from the emotional standpoint of like, hey, am I any good at doing this? It's like you question, like, what am I doing wrong? Why can't these places be busier? Why can't I make money? Why can't they be successful? So, there's a little bit of, stick to it that needs to happen there. You can tweak some of your business operating philosophies, which I think we had to do. And so there's a little bit of resilience there. But I think those were probably 3 years that were very, very challenging, not only for the restaurants to be able to continue, but also for myself personally to say like, hey, was this the right thing to do to open up these two big restaurants at a time where, and not that we would have known, where the economy had really tanked.
So how did you keep yourself motivated through those very challenging times to just hang in there, and rather than just throw in the towel and say, well, on to the next project, this one's just too difficult to handle?
I think you have to, you really have to tap into that gratitude for people enjoying what you do in terms of food, in terms of service, in terms of hospitality. And, that we started to slowly pick up, and people started to appreciate what we were doing. They're fine dining restaurants. They're what I would call relatively expensive. Probably the general public would say that they're very expensive, but I like to think of them as relatively expensive. But you have to think about, well, what can I do to keep improving? So one of the things that we did at Waterbar, which lives on to this day, was we thought about how can we make this a little bit more affordable for people to come to and use maybe on a regular basis. And so that was the start of the Dollar Oyster program at Waterbar. So, I like to say that we were the first ones to do it, probably not the first, but in San Francisco to do dollar oysters, which when we started it was from the time that we opened until the time that we closed. We've readjusted that program a little bit now. So we do it every day, 11:30 to 5:00. Inflation has now carried the price of the dollar oyster to $1.50.
Still a good deal. What's your cost on that? What's your cost?
The cost, it's over a 50% food cost. It's probably closer to a 60 or 70% food cost. But you have to look at it as a loss leader, that it's going to get people in. They're going to drink while they're having oysters.
It's a good hook.
It's eyeballs on the restaurant. It's butts in seats. Sure. And then you're hoping that they come back for lunch or dinner. But, there's different things like that where you have to think about, okay, do I need to make some tweaks in the business model that are still consistent with the brand, that are still consistent with a great seafood restaurant or with a great steakhouse? And, we stuck to it. And, here we are today, as probably two of the higher grossing restaurants in San Francisco.
Yeah, for sure. So how are you dealing with the challenges of the lunch business? Because, the financial district, for those of you that don't know, there's still a vacancy rate of about 35% in the office segment, which I would assume was a big part of your business market. And even though AI is filling up some of that empty space, it's still not the good old times in the financial district. So how are you dealing with that? Dealing with the lunch shift? Lunch.
When we first opened the restaurants, both Epic and Waterbar were open for lunch. We evaluated, the dynamics of lunch business, and we wound up closing Epic for lunch. So basically what it came down to is we were staffing two big restaurants and splitting the pie of what business was out there for lunch.
I see.
We looked at Waterbar as maybe more lunch friendly in terms of its menu and sort of the what it could offer to the guests that want to go out for lunch. So it's just Waterbar that's open now. And I think, we definitely went through some lean times. One of the competitive advantages we have on the waterfront is the outdoor seating that we have. So weather can really dictate whether people will come down and see us. certainly on great weather days,
Sure.
people just gravitate towards the waterfront. So, I think we've adjusted menu, we've adjusted staffing levels so that it can kind of fit within the framework of, what our goal is to do 100 lunches every day.
I see.
Now, we probably don't make money on 100 lunches. We probably break even,
Yes.
but it sets us up for maybe some after work business in the bar and lounge and on the patio. And then it sets us up for dinner.
Yeah. And you're amortizing some of your prep overhead, right? During lunchtime, they're getting ready for dinner, right? The food, the back of the house, right?
Yes. We're open. There's still people here. The kitchen is still rolling. We're still doing all the things to
Sure.
get ready for service 7 days a week.
Yeah, that makes sense. Cool. So what are your strongest areas of expertise and how do you use these strengths to overcome the major challenges of the business?
Well, I think one of the things for me that I was, sort of lucky is that having a degree in business administration with a major in accounting, I'm able to look at financial statements in a way that maybe some of the more creative individuals within the restaurant business who are amazing at what they do might not put as a priority. So that's always been a strength for me, is to analyze numbers and look at where different opportunities may come from that. That's on the business side. On the operational side, I've always looked at my strength as being not necessarily an expert in any one particular category or avenue, but that I could be a very good judge of what Joe, everyday guest in the restaurant, would perceive and how they would look at it and what they would take away from it in terms of value. So I just try to put myself in the shoes of what a normal guest would be in the restaurant. And so if you present a dish, I can look at it, say that dish looks really good. I can taste it and say that dish tastes really good. And then you tell me what it's priced at. And I can tell you that's worth it. That has value in terms of what a guest would perceive. So that's where I've tried to always focus. Like, that's why I work with great chefs. They're the ones that know food. I work with great wine people. They run the wine and beverage programs. And I feel like, my knowledge in those areas is probably above what a typical guest would have that comes into the restaurant, but it isn't at the level of expertise as the people that I work with. And I just try to put myself into the shoes of those that are coming into the restaurant. And then how do you make those people feel good?
That's great. Well said. So your perception of understanding price value, you've basically garnished this expertise from your years of experience in the business, I assume.
Yeah, and
working with the professionals that you have worked with.
This is a tricky one, and especially right now, as we see the dynamics of the economy are such that people are concerned about how much does everything cost. Gallon of gas is now over $6, and it's top of mind for people. How much do you spend when you go to the grocery store? So that certainly translates out to how much are you going to spend if you go out to eat in a restaurant? What is it going to cost? And that's going to determine maybe whether or not I even go out, or certainly how often am I going to go out? And so that one is the challenge. There is to balance that with the fact that the cost of everything to us as restaurant operators is going up, not just the cost of food and beverage, which is certainly a big concern. And in a steakhouse, the cost of beef going up has to be a primary focus.
Sure.
But the cost of labor is going up, the cost of insurance, cost of energy. PG&E is going to raise their rates. So the cost of all the ancillary aspects, repairs and maintenance, garbage pickup, all that stuff just gets to be more expensive. And so you have to figure out, how can I still make money, but also be affordable to a guest in terms of the value? So, one of the strategies that we've used at Waterbar and Epic, and this really came from working with Pat Coletto is he said, you never want to be the most expensive restaurant. Leave that to, the uber fine dining restaurants with great chefs that are doing phenomenal food and tasting menus. So they can be the upper end of the market, but you're going to always want to be a little bit more expensive than that big group in the middle that's considered reasonably priced. So kind of go right in that niche in the middle, not the most expensive, but a little bit more expensive than what everybody else is. What that allows you to do is use great ingredients and staff the restaurant really well. So, one of the things I think that we have always tried to do is to make sure to balance the amount of employees working to deliver a great guest experience without anybody having to feel like they've got the weight of the entire restaurant on their shoulders. So it's a little bit of a game. It's definitely a balancing act. I would say it's more and more challenging now than it ever has been.
Yes.
Because especially at a higher end fine dining restaurant, you're segmenting the group of potential guests that are going to come in based on wherever their financial capacity is. And, I think that there's a little bit of risk there. You don't want to become the restaurant that people will only go to on special occasions. You want to be the restaurant that people go to on special occasions, but you don't want it to be the only reason that they go there. So right. I'd say that the challenge of balancing menu pricing, check averages versus value versus volume is really critical right now.
So do you have a component of your customer base that you classify as a regular customer base, so to speak? They come in on some sort of regular routine basis versus just a special occasion group?
Yeah, we do. And I think, if I go over to Acre Kitchen and Bar in Rockridge in Oakland, that restaurant is a more neighborhood type of restaurant. And it's one where keeping prices at a menu prices at a reasonable level is super important because you want people to be able to come once, maybe twice a week. Epic and Waterbar may be a little bit different. I think where we like to see our real regular guests are in the 3 o'clock to 6 o'clock time frame. You can call it happy hour or after work, but that's when people that live or work in the neighborhood down here on the southern waterfront are going to be more apt to be regular guests. And then I think, there's also a certain segment in San Francisco that's business related. So we want our restaurants to be ones where people will host business dinners. Certainly the location for us helps us. Yes. Being right on the waterfront across from the Bay Bridge is pretty special.
It is.
And that also drives a lot of our business that's from out of town. The people that are visiting San Francisco as tourists, they want to come down here and be on the water. So we're fortunate in that way.
Yeah. Pete, you touched on this a little bit, but just to go into a little bit more in depth, what changes are you seeing in the hospitality industry in California because of the current economic challenges we face today above and beyond, I think, many other states, such as the high cost of labor, the shortage of employees, increased costs of products, cost of goods, occupancy costs, and other expenses? Where do you see this industry going, in the near future because of these extraordinary challenges we're facing? Unlike, so many states in the union where they have tip credit and meal credit and they get the minimum wage down for front of the house people to $4 or $5 in Texas or whatever it is. It's obvious California setting the bar at April of 24, $20 minimum set that's for fast food franchises, 60 more units to set the bar for the whole industry. So it's just so challenging, and the cost of living for these employees, et cetera. How do you deal with all these challenges?
Yeah, I mean, that is really, where this balancing the needs of the guests, the employees, and the owners comes into play, because I think you have to recognize what is going to be an acceptable level of profitability for the business to be sustainable. And then, how can you move that over onto the guest side of providing value, and then onto the employee side of being able to provide an establishment where, they're going to be able to count on their work hours and count on making good money in order to be able to live in the Bay Area, which is a challenge in and of itself.
Absolutely.
So, what are the things to look at? I think we balance labor costs is the big variable within restaurants, because, your cost of goods sold, your food costs and your beverage costs, based on what your programming is, that's gonna be kind of set. Yes, you have to manage it, but the labor cost is the one variable where you got to look at, okay, where maybe can I cut back a couple people, and where do I need to add a couple people? So that one is I'd say the big key for us. And with 250 employees, that is a big challenge. So I would say one of the things that we take a really hard look at is turnover, and trying to keep turnover at a low number. And this in turn, I think, helps the efficiency of a restaurant, and is going to help the profitability of a restaurant. And it's going to help the consistency of the operations. When you have people that have worked for you for multiple years, they understand what the standards are. They know what to expect in terms of the workload. And so this is an area that I think is really critical for us, is retaining employees, keeping them happy. Then there's a lot of other things, Steve, like technology. I mean, that's certainly one that is starting to come on more so, especially with artificial intelligence, taking over in San Francisco in a big way. So there's, certain aspects of AI that could make a restaurant a little bit more efficient, or could even help you in terms of some of the things you're thinking about, whether it's menu design, whether it's marketing programs. But ultimately, it is still a people business. It's one of the things that I really love about restaurants, is like you can't operate it with robots.
Yeah.
There may be certain concepts that could incorporate aspects of that into what they do. But in terms of fine dining, high touch restaurants, still a people business.
Sure, of course. So we touched on technology a little bit here, but what technology have you actually adopted in your business, and how has it impacted operations?
Yeah, I think, a couple things that we're working with right now, are the reservation systems within the private dining sector. So private dining or banquets is a big part of our business at Waterbar and Epic. And it's a big boost when we can do it over at Acre in Oakland, but certainly in San Francisco, the opportunities are there, because typically with private dining, you're going to run a higher profitability rate than your a la carte business in the dining room. So where you can supplement the operations with that. So we've got a couple different applications that we use. One is Triple Seat, one is Perfect Venues, that allow us to, field inquiries as efficiently as possible, and then get to a booking or a contract or deposit stage as quickly as we possibly can. We've just started working with an AI phone answering service. So there's a couple out there in the marketplace. And this is an interesting dynamic, because, think about your own experience with dealing with whatever it might be, where you have to encounter an AI answering service. Could be the doctor's office, could be the DMV, could be, a number of different things. And I think just the natural human tendency is to not like having to deal with, an AI person. So this is something that in the restaurant business, where has always been known as high touch.
Yes.
You now incorporate this AI service. You have to make sure that it can ultimately do pretty much everything that a human being could do, even to the point of being able to say thank you, which I think is so important.
Absolutely.
But, so this is something that we're working with. Obviously, like our reservation system, we've worked with Open Table for many years. I'm proud of my relationship with them. One of the restaurants that I managed with Bill Kimpton was Splendido in the Embarcadero Center, no longer there, but it was the beta site number 2 for Open Table back in 2000. So that reservation system and working with them to maximize seating capacity, really taking a look at turn times, knowing what the flow of a restaurant can really be. How can you maximize it? Where do you need to back off a little bit? Those pieces of technology are some of the ones that we've used. I will say personally for me, and it probably filters in a little bit into how the people that I work with in the restaurants operate, is that we're kind of old school. And, I think that the people that purchase food and purchase beverages in my restaurants, they like to look at the invoices by hand. They don't want to scan them into a computer. They want to go line by line. They want to use a pen to approve it and then send it off to be paid. And then they want to keep track of it by hand. And yes, it's not the most efficient way, but what it's done for us is provide a consistency in that cost side of the business where we're pretty solid there.
That's cool. That's great. So other than using the technology for the things that you just mentioned, you obviously have using mobile units, mobile devices for credit cards, et cetera, at the point of sale.
Yeah, point of sale. And it's something with a fine dining restaurant that I think, you have to see how does it stay with your brand and with the guest perception. So, we've experimented because we've got big patio areas and big outside areas that spread the restaurant out more. We've worked with some of the handheld mobile technology. And for us, what it does really well is the payment processing. So being able to take a mobile device to a table and let them pay from there can be efficient. In terms of the ordering at the table, in our style of restaurant, we're definitely looking for a little higher touch. And so I don't think that it totally works. But, again, it's another piece of technology that we certainly know that we have to open our eyes to. We can't just say, no, it's not going to work. We have to try.
Yeah. Have you tried it? The mobile unit?
Yeah, we have. I think the thing that for us, and when you get into restaurants like ours, the menu, both from a food side and a beverage side, is so extensive that trying to work with it on a handheld device is really, I find that it's challenging for the people that work for us.
I see. Okay, interesting. So of the shifting areas here a little bit, so you've obviously accomplished a lot in your career and you've achieved many things. What single accomplishment that you have through your career has been the most meaningful to you?
Well, I don't know that I can just pick out one, but
Or say the top.
certainly establishing Waterbar and Epic Steak on the southern waterfront in San Francisco. I would not consider us icons at this stage of the game. Some of the restaurants in San Francisco, like Boulevard and Delfina, Skoma's down on Fisherman's Wharf, House of Prime Rib, those are iconic restaurants. Have been around for longer than we have. I think what we've done is we've brought an energy and vitality to the southern waterfront in San Francisco, and we've grown up along with the neighborhood as it's grown up. So, there's now lots of different residential around in the neighborhood. There's multiple developments down by Oracle Park with the Giants Mission Rock development. You've got Chase Center that's opened over the course of the last few years. So I think that's one thing that I'm pretty proud of, that we've established ourselves at this end of the waterfront. And then, we give back to the community. So one of the things we do at Waterbar, we call it the Oyster Give Back Program. And so we add a nickel onto the cost of every oyster that we sell. And at the end of every quarter, We add up how many oysters we've sold, we times it by 5 cents, and then we give that money to some nonprofit or charity organization that we feel helps the community, helps San Francisco. So we work with everything from the Alzheimer's Association to Make-A-Wish to Guide Dogs for the Blind to the Marine Mammal Center to Save the Bay. And I think that understanding the role that a restaurant has to the community, like we can't just pick up a brick and mortar restaurant and move it to Austin, Texas or Las Vegas or Kansas City, Missouri. Like we're here in San Francisco. As much as some of the dynamics of the city may be frustrating for us, this is where we are. We have to commit to that. We have to commit to being able to say that we can help do a better job of promoting San Francisco, of giving back to San Francisco. So that's an area that I'm proud of. And then I think, employee development is something that's very gratifying for me. So I have a handful of employees, probably 15 that have worked at either Waterbar or Epic for the entire time that we've been open. And that's something that I take great pride in, that somebody has made really, a significant portion of their life to be able to work for us and with us. And then seeing people develop, move on, go on, I've got, a few stories out there of people that have, worked with us that have then gone on to open their own restaurant, to be the chef in their own restaurant. And that for me, like knowing that I contributed in some way to somebody being a little bit better than maybe what they were before they came to work for us, that's really gratifying for me.
Sure. So, and I think this speaks really well of your sincerity and your integrity and your devotion to the industry and your involvement to try to make the community a better place, your involvement with all these these charitable organizations, and your teaching, giving back, I think is obviously speaks well of you, and you certainly resonate that goodness in yourself by your acts. You actually do what you believe, which is very, very gratifying and very admirable. So you've been a real.
One of the things that I learned, maybe in my in my 30s and my 40s, I felt like I'm a Superman. I could do it all. I could work 70 hours a week. I could, run multiple restaurants. I would say, the business is somewhat humbling, but from a pure mindful standpoint, as I've gotten older, I've realized that it is not about me. It is all about the people that I work with.
Yes.
And it is all about, putting together great teams that deliver the experience. And so as I get a little bit older, and I'm contemplating, okay, well, what does retirement look like if that's even in the future? I know that the only way that I can retire and that the restaurants can live on in the way that I would like them to live on is to have great people trained and invested in the culture of how we run the restaurants.
Yes. And carrying on the great lessons that you have taught them over the years, for sure. That's wonderful. So, Pete, I want to acknowledge you for the significant contributions you've made to the restaurant industry, including being a mentor to hundreds of management folks, some of which I assume started their own restaurants as a result of your leadership. Additionally, you've been a mentor to hundreds of non-management personnel, many of whom rose to the ranks of management due to the excellent training you gave them. Your contributions to several nonprofit organizations, as we've mentioned, as well as teaching in hotel, restaurant, lodging schools has made a positive impact on hundreds of people's lives. So the industry is very grateful for your experience and disseminating that philosophy that you've so well preached during this conversation to so many people that have benefited from you. If someone wants to reach you in the future, what's the best way to do so?
Email is probably always the best, and it's Pete@waterbarsf.com. That'll get to me. And I try to make it a point to answer all emails within 24 hours. It's probably not a guarantee, but that's really the best way. Or you can just stop by the restaurants. I'm typically at Waterbar or Epic every day, except for Sundays at some point in time. You can always leave a message for me at the front desk. I'll get back to people as I can. It's something that, there's times where you feel like you don't have enough time to get everything done in the restaurant business, that there's always something else to deal with. But that's kind of how life is.
Yes.
That you have to also be able to just roll with that from a conscious standpoint of knowing that things are always going to change and things are always going to happen.
Absolutely. Yes. Well said. So if you have any questions from the presentation, please email them to me at steve@restaurantrrealty.com, and I will respond to you shortly after the show. Our immediate future Dealmaker co-hosts include, in July, Bob Freeman, who was the co-founder of Victoria Station Railroad-themed steakhouse chain of over 100 restaurants and the founder of California Cafe, another well-known chain. Bob is currently the owner of famous Buena Vista Cafe in San Francisco, which is the birthplace of Irish coffee in the U.S. And Bob also owns the famous Trident building in Sausalito. Other future co-host will be Gary Rulli, proprietor and executive pastry chef of Emporio Rulli in Larkspur and Risto Bar in San Francisco. We'll be announcing our lineup of additional Restaurant Dealmaker co-hosts for 2026 in the near future. Thank you again, Pete, for the excellent presentation you made and the words of wisdom, which I'm sure will basically impact many of the listeners that will be listening to this presentation. Thank you all for joining us today. And if you want to get in touch with me, again, it's steve@restaurantrrealty.com, or I can be reached toll-free at 888-995-9701. Take care of yourself. Take care of others and stay well. Thank you again.